broadcasting live from the Roanoke Valley of southwestern Virginia. Join us and see what life looks like from a medium's perspective with Reverend Tracey Lockwood, the medium's medium.
Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Before I get to today's two delicious guests, you will just can't even believe who I have on the show today. I just wanted to remind you that if you're interested in developing your abilities, that I offer an amazing array of both private one-on-one tutoring for your psychic mediumship and channeling and spirit art and animal communication and whatever you're pretty much interested in, past life readings. And I also have the 12-week certification program, the Professional Psychic Mediumship Certification Program that's offered twice a year, 3 levels of certification dependent on your performance, issued through the Universal Mind 501c3. So if you're interested in that or other training possibilities, please check it out on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com. I want to tell you a little bit about our two guests today. The first guest is a New York Times and internationally best-selling author of the Medicine Women series. And that chronicles her 3 decades of study and work with shaman healers on 4 continents. She is the author of 20 books. She is recognized worldwide as a leader in the field of spiritual healing and personal empowerment. And she serves as a link between the ancient world of shamanism and today's people that are just craving a deeper understanding of the profound and also wanting to learn alternative possibilities and be healed. And so I'd like to welcome first to the show, Lynn Andrews. Welcome, Lynn.
Oh, hi. It's so wonderful to be on your show.
I'm just thrilled to have you. I'm just so thrilled to have you. And I want to go ahead and introduce your co-conspirator here. And before I do, I just wanted to say that the two guests today have created an absolutely original, just mind-blowing deck of oracle cards called Sacred Vision Oracle Cards, and we'll be talking more about that later. But I want to introduce the other partner in this endeavor. So he says that his art reflects his own spiritual journey. His art is self-taught, but he gives credit to some people that inspired him, like Susan Leggett, Mallory Taylor, Virgil and Emma Hughes, Wallace Hughes, Doris Luttrell, Myrick Creeping Bear, Oscar Howe, Paul Pletka, and John Biggers. And all I can tell you with that sort of mundane introduction is that it doesn't begin to reflect the depth and the mystical quality of his artwork. And I'd like to welcome to the show also Robert Taylor. Welcome, Robert.
Hello, it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have both of you on the show, and a lot of our guests like to spy on our guests while we're on air so that they can learn a little bit about you while the show's going on. Lynn has a website, and it is lynnandrews.com. So that's pretty straightforward, lynnandrews.com. And Robert prefers to remain slightly mysterious, but he was willing to give us his email address. So you can jot that down. It's roberttaylor@oklahomanative.com. Well, I want to thank both of you and Devra, your publicist, for sending me a copy of this deck. I felt very special Honestly, I grew up in a household that's highly creative. My mom is a watercolor artist and quite wonderful at that, although she lives in a small town and her work is not as celebrated as it deserves, but she's truly an artist. I also am an artist and then also do the whole psychic mediumship thing. This deck was just incredibly unique, and I'll ask, of course, about that first. But the one thing that I wanted to say is that, Lynn, the way that you describe yourself, even though you have psychic mediumship capacity, you don't bill yourself that way. I really liked the way that you explained that you were a teacher and healer of mind and heart. Would you take a minute to talk to the people that are listening about why you didn't choose to use more traditional titles? Because I know for me, when I made the decision that I would start doing readings and teaching, and that I just, for me, it was just like the simplest path between 2 points was just to say, just go ahead and call it psychic mediumship. And I don't actually like the term, because I feel like it distances me from other people because they think it's something different than they do, which is not the case. Everybody is psychic and everybody has the ability to have visions and connect with the other side and be prophetic and all of those things if they will put their focus in that direction and their heart. And so I just was really captured by your phrasing it, teacher and healer of mind and heart. That's so beautiful. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting that you heard that. Shamans are different. A medicine person is different. Each tribe, each nation, each clan produces the sacred world kind of in a different way. In other words, if you're a Plains Native American, you're hunting for buffalo. If you're a Tlingit in Alaska, you're hunting for salmon. So the rituals are vastly different. But always at the center of a ceremony, you will find the word or the emptiness of power. So power, in a sense, and I think most of you know what I'm talking about. Power in its essence is the same for each person. In other words, if I'm working with a shaman healer in Peru, and he speaks no English, we still understand each other about the really important aspects of wisdom and the soul. So, I teach people to find the oracle within themselves because they have embraced the voice of wisdom. In other words, they are trying to find their way home, in a sense, finding that incredible voice inside of themselves that heals not only them, but other people. So it's the part of you that connects with the divine, the great spirit and all of life. So when I say I'm a medium, in the sense that when I do personal ceremony, when I work with someone, I move from first attention into second attention, which is a great difference. And I'm sure it's pretty much the feeling that you have when you go into the act of being a medium. The cards, these oracle cards, are written, and Robert's done the magnificent paintings. These paintings and the teachings that are on the back of each card are, I think, a really, really important thing. What it does, the purpose of the cards, first of all, they're not pretty little pictures of angels or little animals.
Cutie stuff. Yeah, it's not frou-frou. Absolutely. No, they're very profound. The work is extremely
very strong.
Yes.
And I meant them to be a quickener, in a sense, to quicken you and say, wait a minute, wake up,
Yeah. Let me interject just a second. I pulled a card in particular, and it's the one for creation, the number 19, and it says it's just an incredible picture of this Native American man with a single feather. His face is painted white. He's embracing a pole that has a mystical symbol at the bottom. And there are different objects that are kind of woven into the ropes that are tied around the pole. There are 3 free-flying butterflies. There is what looks to be a buffalo, also a picture of the Madonna, and there's 2 feathers at the end of this rope. He's holding a cross that is attached to some beads in his hand. And I wanted to read for our listeners what was written on the back of the card. It represents the north and white, the color white. The mountain spirits speak, telling you of their ancient memories. You walk around the stones of a sacred fire, and you sense the breath of your ancestors in the purple smoke. They wish to transform your doubt and your pain. There is a ceremonial chant loud in your brain, and the dancers, like the sacred dancers of old, are pulling you into ceremony. They are the equivalent of the Great Spirit, here to remind you of the creation of life and death. You open your prayers as a sacred hoop of your life and offer them to the winds of time, caressing the world. A great warrior appears and descends on the mountain pathway to join you. You have made a sacrifice in your life. What is it? He asks. What is your life's greatest truth? And how do you express it? Is it your truth held in your pain, or is it hidden within the butterflies that softly lead your transformation? Tell us a little bit about why you chose to do the cards the way that you did. And Robert, I haven't forgotten you. We will pull you into the discussion as well.
Well, part of the explanation on that card is that ceremony is the glue that binds culture, and the rituals of ceremony allow a true giving of oneself. Mind, body, and spirit all need the sanctuary of ritual to allow stillness and peace. It is during the solitude of a ceremony that all freely merge into one and complete the circle of creation. That's the underlying strength, I think, behind the cards.
It's just...
sorry.
It's just beautiful.
Well, thank you. And Robert's painting is so magnificent. But when you look at a painting like any of these cards, you go, ooh, wow, what is this? Because they're used to a different kind of image, something more harmonious and sweet and loving, which my first cards, the Power Deck, are like that. It's a celebration of beauty. These cards are quickeners. They make you think. They make you stop in your tracks.
Yeah, when I first opened the deck, I was first struck by the intensity of the imagery on it. And then I was like, well, there are not as many cards. I'm like, in my mind, this is what I'm thinking, there are not as many cards. And then I looked on the back, and it feels to me that the questions that are asked or the information that is contained on the cards sort of draws you into your own journey rather than just giving you sort of popping a piece of candy in your mouth and saying everything's going to be fine. which we all like to feel good. And of course, we can always look for an optimistic future. But this had such a depth, and it really generated a certain amount of personal questioning, like when it says, you have made a sacrifice in your life, what is it? It makes you think. It's not just like, oh, job well done, here's a piece of candy, and when he asks, what is your life's greatest truth and how do you express it? And is your truth held in your pain, or is it hidden within the butterflies that softly lead your transformation? You can't just look at a word. A lot of oracle decks, and I love oracle decks. They have, I use them in teaching myself, as well as tarot. And for listeners that might not know the difference between an oracle deck and a tarot deck, I'll tell you what, I'll field that question to you, Lynn. Go ahead and tell them what you think of as the difference between a tarot deck and an oracle.
Well, the tarot deck is very ancient. It has the Hebrew hierarchy behind it. It has a great religious, I would say, intent embedded in all of those cards, and they are prophetic. They are magnificent. The tarot is, but I have never really studied the tarot, because when I was working with grandmother in The Woman of Weird, WYRD. She was part of an ancient shamanic tradition in Europe. And the cards that she presented to me to teach with, they were the power deck that I then did. I don't know how many years ago, 20 years, 15 years ago, I did the power deck. But it was prophecy. It is a beautiful deck. Also, incredible. It's the antithesis of this deck.
Yes, just a different purpose and a different style.
Yes. And the Native American has a symbology, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but I really believe it. It's like the Native American people in this country and all over the world, the Aborigines in Australia, etc., they have all been forgotten in a certain kind of way. They're a forgotten people. And I think obviously that's a huge tragedy. And these cards are Native American in terms of the paintings that Robert did. He is part Native American. I'm not. So I would not presume to teach the Sweat Lodge or a Uwiti Lodge or anything like that, or do Sundance. Those are very much
traditions within that culture.
Right, very traditional. So I'm not Indian. So I teach people a lot of the symbolism is from all over the world, from Native people. And the symbolism is so good, so true, like when you're making a shield. With every stitch, you pray, and so forth. I think that the Oracle deck is the same way. Every time you use it, it takes you deeper. And I think that's what we're trying to do in this society, but nobody knows how to access the hidden secrets within themselves. And this deck of cards helps you find your way home, so to speak.
Yes. That is. Go ahead.
Well, I don't mean to rattle on here, but
no, it's good.
In doing 20 book signings around the world, I have met people all over the world. And every time I'd go on a book signing, I'd also give private sessions. And I found that about 93% of the people in the world come out of abuse of one kind or another.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an abuse is abuse. It just
Yes.
nobody there to welcome you home could be to one person as abusive as being it. You know, it's all relative. But if you understand that you come out of abuse, then you begin to understand your life. And if you're a real puella or puer, meaning puella eternus, means the eternal child.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that you never had a childhood because you had to be an adult as soon as you could to stay out of trouble.
Yes.
You wanted, you know what I mean?
I
Tracey?
do,
I mean, you
because
wanted.
I among my clients, I always am surprised actually when I find someone that had a marvelous upbringing and had an idyllic childhood. I'm sort of like, oh, really? You know, it's like fascinating to me to find the few that do. And you were talking about, you know, how indigenous cultures have become sort of the forgotten people of the world, but they're also the keepers of a lot of sacred wisdom. And as their populations have diminished, that the number of dedicants and adherents to carrying on that wisdom and knowledge is decreasing. And I'm noticing across the globe a lot of traditions opening some of their most sacred teachings to people that aren't from their tribe or their clan or their, you know, personal, local, special, specific culture. And there's a certain beauty in sharing that wisdom, but it's sort of a bittersweet thing too, to see the homogenization of cultures that occurs along with that.
It's so powerful. And I have a nonprofit that records the elders and their stories, because elders, I don't care where they come from. They could be Caucasian elders from England. All people have a story.
Yes.
And in particularly the Native people. So I've dedicated that type of study to Native people who remember the history, who remember the way it really was.
Yes.
And there are a lot of things that were great and very, very powerful. A lot of things that were very difficult, like any society.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask Robert something, if I could draw him into the discussion a second. Robert, you said that your artwork reflects your life experiences. I'm curious about how that wove through the imagery on the deck. Can you tell us from the artist's angle there?
I'd be glad to. I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandfather was Scottish, Osage, and Cherokee. And he's when I was young here in Oklahoma, powwows weren't every weekend. There wasn't competitive dancing. They were still social gatherings occasionally, but they're usually brought together for meetings. And he used to take me, and they were tribal. And so we used to go to the powwows. And when I was probably about 7 or 8, all of us kids would be running around while the parents and the adults were more into the dance. And as kids, it was good for a time, then you go off running. And there was several of us who were playing around, and we ran across what we'd call an old-timer, which was an elderly gentleman, and one of the elders of the tribe. And he was sitting on a log, and he definitely had a few snorts, we'll say, and he was talking, and he was talking in Osage, and none of us really knew what he was saying, but he was carrying on quite a conversation with the air. And we were laughing, and we were kind of making fun about that. And my grandfather hit me one time in my life, and this was the time. And he didn't hit me hard, but he thumped me. You know how you flip somebody with your finger?
Yes, yes.
He flipped. I just felt this thud right on the back of my head, and he put his finger to his mouth for us all to be quiet, and he made us all follow him. And he took me offside, and he started telling me, "Why, you fool, do you not understand? He's talking to his ancestors. He may be talking to some of your ancestors." And somebody said something else, and he said, "Well, that's no white man would understand that. So what's about that?" And that's when I got my lecture about you're as much white as you are Indian. Mm-hmm. And so and he told me at that time he had a third grade education. And he was the most intelligent philosopher I ever knew. But he told me we're all the same. We're one tribe. We're different clans. We all have the same fears, desires, thoughts. We just express them differently. And so I've spent my career trying to say that now, is that we are all one tribe. And that's imagery. When you look at the artwork that's on the cards, you'll see a lot of different symbols juxtaposed against each other from different cultures.
Oh,
and
yes.
What I'm just saying, every culture believes in ceremony and ritual, and we're all trying to attain the same place. So as far as the artwork goes, I always tell people I build doors, and all I do is paint a door. I decorate it. And if you open it up, that's art. Where it takes you, that is what we would really call art. But where it takes you is that chance of self-discovery and accessing the universal knowledge that's there. And I like to tell people, so when we did this, I always like to tell people, I built the door that gets you into the room that Lynn can tell you how to turn on the lights.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Robert, I'm going to ask you a question. This show, and Lynn, I'll be right back to you on the question that I want to ask you too. Robert, the show is called From a Medium's Perspective because I didn't want a demonstration show. I didn't want a shallow show. I really wanted to share what life looks like from a medium's perspective. And of course, mediumship is not the only way for spirit to express itself. The divine expresses itself through artists, musicians, dancers, speakers, actors. Any right brain endeavor is that subtle realm expressing itself through us. So I wanted to ask you, how has being an artist changed your perspective on life?
I think that's an excellent. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never been asked that specific question. You get asked a lot of questions about why you do things, but not how it affects you. I think what I discovered, as everybody, being self-taught, I spent a lot of time just trying to hone the craft itself, so that you could actually, it'd be just like a writer trying to make sure they spell their words right, or a speaker making sure they know how to enunciate. And that's so you start out that way. But then you discover it does change the way you see things, that you start becoming such an observer that you try to constantly have your antenna up. And I tell people sometimes that means that it's a lonely job when you do these things, because you have to pull back and observe. But once you do that, you have to move from that observer to participant to truly understand it. And so it has taken me to put me into positions that normally I might not wanted to do, or would not even have done if I had not been trying to pursue the idea or the thought behind the painting I wanted to do. And then doing this long enough, I've realized every human being is an artist. And I want to finish this statement with this, because this is why I finish every lecture I give, is that for everybody to remember that you are an artist. It's the only unique thing that human beings do. We're driven to create and collect art. And your art is whatever your passion is. And so your body's your brush, the earth is the canvas, and your painting is your life.
That's true. We make our decisions, and I think that we feel our most fulfilled when we are allowing that flow to move through us, when we're creating our life and touching the lives of other people in ways that are authentic to that particular vision that we're given. It's a beautiful thing in at least most cases. Lynn, for you, how has being a shaman, healer, and shamanic healer and practitioner, teacher. How has this shifted the way that you see life?
Oh my golly. I started out at about 6 years old, 4, 5, 6 years old, somewhere in there, being able to see lights around people. And I thought everybody saw lights around people. I was seeing aspects of the aura, but didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't ever question it because I thought everybody was like that. Well, I found out one day when my best friend, Beverly, came by on her pony so that we could ride together to school. This was in eastern Washington, and we'd ride to school together, etc. Anyway, I looked at her this one morning, and she was just a violent red and all around her, and I could see the pain in her. She wasn't crying, but I could see it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mentioned it to her, and I said, is there anything I can do to help? Well, or however you say that when you're 6
Mm-hmm.
years old. And she just went blank. She did not want me to invade her privacy, which is what she thought I was doing.
Right,
Yes,
because
I
most
think
people
people
walk
can learn
around
that.
kind of blind and
Right.
choose to focus on more mundane aspects of life, and they feel safe behind their privacy fences. Not everybody's ready for.
So, yeah, well, I was so horrified, so hurt. I'm an only child. She was my best friend. It changed me. For a long time, I would not even admit to myself what I was seeing. And I could see a lot. And I turned it off, because I wanted to be like everybody else. And I knew that people would get mad or misunderstand me. So until I was about 15, I didn't really allow myself to see. And you know what that does. You're imploding your energy. And you have no explosion of energy by, say, being able to talk with someone about what you're experiencing. Eventually, that implosion of energy is going to blow up. You're just gathering and gathering. And then finally, some things happened in my life, and I went in search of a teacher. And I went all over the world, and I met a lot of men, a lot of male monks, etc., that were magnificent teachers. But I really wanted to learn from a woman, partly because I'm a woman, but because Mother Earth is female. And I wanted to understand the core of what being sacred really, really means. And I found that I was awakening a vision and insight, a voice of wisdom and spirit within myself. And I was beginning to find my own way back to my harmony in life. You know, it's interesting. If you come out of abuse, you are ever so careful about trusting anyone. You have an incredible shaman ability. If you have been abused,
Yes.
you can sit somewhere in a room and be totally invisible.
Yes.
And or you can take part in things in a more normal way. But it helps you and your divine essence and what you're seeking to learn and understand. So you produce kind of a sacred mirror for yourself, because it transports you into higher awareness with the truth and wisdom, what you're looking for.
Yes.
Inside, you know, not outside, not trying to find a teacher who will meditate you, who will do all these things for you while you meditate. To me, you lose the experience of building your awareness. Yeah, and the Oracle deck, it's about finding your own master, your own teacher, which is you inside of you. You already have all the wisdom, but you don't know how to access it. So I teach people about accessing those secret corners that are in the shadows of your life. And we all have them, or we wouldn't be here. So, and that's how it kind of changed my life. I was living in Beverly Hills, married to a man that was one of the heads of Warner Brothers, have a daughter, and I lived the kind of life that people dream of. And my problem was that I could not speak my truth to anyone.
Yes.
Because they didn't, at that time, it would be very different now, but at that time, they just didn't understand.
Yes. I think also another aspect of surviving abuse, or, and spending that time with that duality of the sort of reality of what's going on for you versus the superficial exterior that denies what's going on for you, is it makes you very self-reflective, and it can build patience, and it can definitely build observation of other people, especially if you're not given a place really to participate. And, each person's experience is different. Some are, feel confined and have not expressed themselves. Other people have raged against the machine. Other people have disassociated themselves or stepped out and just decided, I'm just going to do it anyway, and I don't really care what other people think. And then as we mature and move forward, I like what Robert said about, we're all one tribe, just different clans. We start to find maybe first our clan, but ultimately our one tribe, our union with all there.
Yeah, I think that it's to become a seer, to become a person like you, who is a medium. You work in a very certain way, I'm sure, and with guardians and all of those wonderful things. In shamanism, you are unique. Every shaman is so different from every other shaman.
That's how I teach also, that it's incredibly unique and personal to the individual, the way that they express their gifts, because we aren't alike, actually. I think that there are a lot of formula teaching that does occur within the field of psychic mediumship, but it's not how I teach either.
Yeah, I really understand that. And a lot of people, are very uncomfortable in my company, say they, I think that I'm looking at them, and I would never do that unless you ask me.
Absolutely, yes. Can't help if your focus is drawn to the depth or the breadth or the height of something. You see it. Whether you speak it is up to them, whether they want to listen or not.
Right, exactly. So the Oracle deck strengthens your relationship.
I love
with
that.
Inspiration and integrity. In other words, it's the master within you, not the master.
It's not like a little slot machine where you get the answer and then go on without thought. It provokes more thought, but it guides that thought. I want to ask you how you and Robert feel free to chime in too. How did the two of you find each other for this project, for the Sacred Vision Oracle cards?
Well, I'll just say that I first we met in Santa Fe, and Lynn frequented a gallery that I was showing my work in, and we've got to where Lynn, being Lynn, is always curious. One of the few people, when she'd come in, she would ask a lot about the artwork. She wanted to know a lot about it, and then also my thoughts to expound upon what I was talking about. And we got to knowing each other that way. And then about 3 years ago, she approached me telling me she wanted to talk to me, and she had an idea. And Lynn, you can take it from there.
Okay. So
I loved to hear Robert talk on all of this. It's so wonderful. And I saw this extraordinary artist, and met him in the gallery, and he definitely walks his truth. He has a beautiful concept of spirit and our connection to spirit and the bridge that is needed so desperately between the ancient world and the world of today. We fit together so well. The paintings are tough. I could say, Robert, is that a good word to use, or am I misusing that for you?
No, I like that. I like that. Like I said, that I decorate doors. As an artist, all of us, every human being feels we all have a story, and we all want somebody to have a chance to hear some of what we say. Simply because I think at times when we say it out loud, it's easier for us to absorb within our own thought process. And that's why it works. When you work with a healer, it works. They're actually a mirror bouncing things back to you. And Lynn was doing that for me, whether she knew it or not, there in the gallery. And I was just honored and excited when she proposed this whole project.
I'm holding several of the cards in my hand, and each one of them just draws you in, like the artwork itself, not just the incredible words that are included on each one, but the artwork itself draws you in. And it's almost like seeing naked souls on the cards.
True.
For me.
Yeah.
It's like it just makes you more curious, more entranced, more touched, more silent, more reflective, just the artwork itself. Robert, one thing I notice about the work is the exaggeration of the perspective of the person. Often drawn in the pictures to people's hands or faces, or you notice kind of a perspective of that particular body from a different angle or orientation. Does that occur naturally within your work, or do you do that intentionally to draw focus? What is that in your work?
A little bit of it probably is both. A lot of it is trying to manipulate the composition to say what I'm trying to say, and that's where you get to a lot of the exaggeration and distortion. And I find that also one of the things is I think that as Lynn, that's one of the things that Lynn, I don't think I've ever told Lynn this, that when Lynn was talking to me early on, and she brought up about people being abused, and that was something that really struck me, because I think every human being sees themselves as being somewhat abused or flawed. And we usually, it manifests itself in some physicality of ourselves. And in tribal belief, and we're all tribal, every human being, is that when you get down to the atomic level, so to speak, of it, is that who we are in essence is between our ears, our thoughts, and our bodies are nothing but a vehicle to act upon those thoughts. And so if we can get away from that, in tribal belief, the physical being is really, it's just a vehicle. And that's why when you go into ceremony, you're to become one with all. And that's why a lot of the exaggeration and a lot of the artwork is there also, trying to show almost almost like it's disappearing, the physical self.
Yes, yeah, I wanted to say it's as deep as looking into the Akashic records or experiencing a life review or looking at the human condition. It's really, for the listeners out there, I can't tell you how profound the work is, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce the two of you to a few more people that will benefit from both of your tremendous gifts. I want to thank each of you for coming on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing your seasoned gifts with us through this Sacred Vision Oracle cards.
Well, Tracey, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, truly.
Yes. And for all the people who are listening, the most valuable thing you have in life is time, and for spending some of it with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Lynn, do you have a parting thought that you'd like to share? We're close to the end of our show here.
Well, this earth is a schoolhouse, and we come here for very good reasons. Being on this planet is a gift. And if you are not on the path to self-discovery, you are missing one of the great reasons that you were born. You are here to learn about you, because the answers to the universe can be found within your own divine being.